Over the next few minutes, Fujio quickly explained the situation to Chin Emo. It all started when she ran into Fu Shiming at the electronics mall, only to then be singled out by the blonde manager. That was why, during the company's hand speed test, she had been deliberately sabotaged. After clearing things up, Fujio casually turned and placed a few slices of meat into Feng Shang's bowl, which finally drew Qin Mo's attention to him. The second young master of the Feng family had clearly snuck into the internal trials on his own. If Feng Yi had known, the spot would have been handed to him outright. Feng Shang, however, assumed Qin Mo was about to rat him out, breaking into a cold sweat on the spot. Seeing this, Fujio stepped in protectively. "Don't pick on him, big shot. He's my teammate now." Qin Mo's expression twisted with confusion as if silently asking, "And I'm not?" Fujio went on to explain that she and Feng Shang plan to enter next month's tryouts to earn their place in the team fair and square. That actually made Qin Mo smile. For once, someone wasn't scrambling for shortcuts. They wanted to win with strength alone. After the meal, Fujio strolled ahead with her arms slung over Feng Shang's shoulder, while Qin Mo trailed behind, silent and brooding. Feng Shang cheerfully asked about the other 3 members of their squad, even joking that maybe they'd hand out some in-game gold later. Fujio smirked with pride, saying that for now it was just the 2 of them, but she wasn't the least bit worried about filling the roster. With that, she threw her arm around Feng Shang again. The killing intent radiating from behind was practically visible. Feng Shang glanced back, caught the look, and instantly got the message. He excused himself and hurried off. That left only Qin Mo and Fujio. The sudden quiet between them was thick with awkward tension. Just as Fujio was about to say goodbye and leave, Qin Mo abruptly snagged her by the collar. He mentioned an evening dinner engagement and flatly ordered her to come along. More than that, he wanted her to help him carry a boss in-game afterward. With no room to argue, Fujio reluctantly agreed. Since there was still half a day before the dinner, Qin Mo decided to take Fujio out to walk it off. Stepping outside, Fujio's eyes instantly landed on a luxury sports car, the latest limited edition with only one in the entire country. Qin Mo slid behind the wheel and drove her straight to the electronics mall they had visited before. The moment the car pulled up, heads turned, eyes glued to the scene. Inside the mall, the staff recognized Qin Mo at once. None of them could believe someone of his status would personally shop for computer parts. A clerk hurried over, and Qin Mo casually mentioned the limited edition mouse Fujio had wanted earlier. With just 4 words, "Bring it out," he left no room for refusal. If it had been anyone else, the staff would have stalled. But with Qin Mo, they didn't dare. Even if it wasn't in stock, they'd rush to get one delivered immediately. Then Qin Mo added, "Remember this face. Whatever he comes for, he gets priority." His head tilted slightly toward Fujio, the words edged with domineering certainty. Fujio froze, stunned. Was Qin Mo actually standing up for her? With Qin Mo footing the bill, Fujio stopped holding back, picking only the best gear. By the time they reached the counter, they were buried in shopping bags. She had always loved tech, but now with the chance to build her own custom rig, Fujio's mood soared higher than ever. But Qin Mo wasn't handing things out for free. He made it clear. If Fujio failed to make it into Qin Corp after the tryouts, every piece of gear would have to be returned at full price. Watching him tuck the card away, Fujio immediately acted up, looping her arms around his neck with a sultry smile, leaning in as if to plant a hot kiss on the spot. But this was still a public place. Qin Mo reacted instantly, seizing her wrist and yanking it back. "Keep this up if you're itching for a beating. And you still dare call me brother." The moment he finished, Fujio chirped out a playful brother. Seeing his stone-cold face, she even teased about calling him daddy instead, asking the great Qin god to just keep her as his sugar baby. When they returned to the hot pot restaurant, Qin Mo's secretary immediately noticed Fujio, baffled as to why the president would show up with this particular troublemaker. Catching the man's stare, Fujio offered a faint smile. That small gesture alone softened the secretary's impression of her, if only a little. As Qin Mo escorted Fujio into the private room, the waiting guests all rose to their feet in unison, warmly greeting his arrival. Qin Mo, however, kept his gaze fixed on Fujio, making sure she wouldn't feel uneasy or out of place in such a formal setting. Once the menu arrived, Qin Mo ordered a spread of dishes he normally wouldn't even glance at. His secretary was puzzled, but when the others at the table finally noticed Fujio, Chin Mo casually introduced her as his god-brother. The moment Fujio gave her surname, the flattery began pouring out, except all of it was aimed at Fu Ximing, the illegitimate son of Fu Zhongyi. As if that weren't enough, they wrapped up by mocking Fujio and He Honghua, turning them into the butt of the joke. Fujio's hand slammed the glass down on the table. Propping her chin on one hand, her eyes swept coldly across them. "I am the so-called Fu family's disgrace you're talking about." The words dropped like ice water. The men nearly jumped out of their seats, realizing every insult had just been said right in front of Chin Mo. And if Chin Mo had brought Fujio here, it meant their connection was anything but ordinary. The blunder laid their ugly faces bare. Fujio had no intention of staying any longer. After tossing out a few cutting remarks, she rose to her feet and declared she was leaving first. Chin Mo smoothly backed her up, saying he would drive her home. With the two presenting a united front, the atmosphere froze solid. The others had no choice but to swallow their embarrassment and let them go. As they were leaving, the men still tried to salvage the deal, bringing up business with Chin Mo. But he only let out a cold laugh and walked away with Fujio without so much as a glance back. With the boss unmoved, they turned their hopes on Secretary Liang, asking him to mediate. Liang only pushed up his glasses and said flatly, "This deal is dead." Not just Chin Mo, even he couldn't stomach it. Everyone knew Chin Mo was fiercely protective of his own. For him to acknowledge anyone as a godbrother was unheard of. No one could figure out what Fujio had done to earn that kind of treatment. From that moment on, Secretary Liang set his stance clearly. Besides the president himself, Fujio was now also someone under his personal protection. Once they got in the car, Secretary Liang took the wheel. Unable to help himself, he kept sneaking glances at Fujio through the rearview mirror, curious about her dynamic with Chin Mo. Fujio caught him instantly and flashed a sweet smile at the mirror. Liang whipped his head forward, cheeks burning red, suddenly thinking he might finally understand why the president had fallen this far. Chin Mo noticed. His hand clamped around Fujio's chin, brows lifting slightly as he warned coolly, "Stop flirting with everyone you meet." Fujio chuckled, saying she'd only greeted Secretary Liang. But that alone was enough to draw Chin Mo's ire. Flipping through a magazine, he muttered dismissively, "What's so interesting about some old man like him anyway?" Up front, Secretary Liang nearly keeled over from the verbal critical hit. Fujio skimmed the magazine and tossed it aside, then winked at Chin Mo, teasing that she'd rather be reading one filled with handsome city playboys. That nearly made Secretary Liang choke. Could it be the president had already been bent? Chin Mo ignored the provocation, his voice firm as he laid down the line. "Once you're inside Chin Corp, you're not allowed to get involved with any of the team members." Back home, Fujio bent down, her arms full of equipment. Chin Mo accidentally caught sight of her exposed back and quickly turned his head away. He told her bluntly not to wear clothes that short again, adding that as a man, she lacked any masculine presence and needed to change that. Fujio forced a laugh, thinking bitterly, how was a girl supposed to pull off manly presence in the first place? After she half-heartedly agreed, Chin Mo suggested she join him for tennis the next day. In his mind, Fujio was already his younger brother, and he was determined to fix her image. But Fujio's heart wavered. If Chin Mo ever found out she was actually a girl, the fallout would be terrifying. She wanted to refuse the plan, but Chin Mo shot down every excuse she came up with. With no way out, she reluctantly agreed. The two then settled on meeting again later in the game. When Fujio pushed open her front door, the sight of the wrecked room made her face instantly darken. Qin Xiaodong stepped out from the side, his eyes red with tears. He told Fujio that the players who had left for other teams had just come by. They called it resigning, but in truth, it was nothing more than an excuse to humiliate He Honghua. Those players had once been nobodies with mediocre talent. No training company was willing to take them. It was He Honghua who, out of kindness, invested everything to nurture them. But now that their names were known and their skills had improved, they not only abandoned her, but also poached the few remaining members of her team. Before leaving, they even sneered that He Honghua had no ability, and that was why she could never raise a proper squad. What hurt He Honghua was not their departure, but the sting of betrayal from people she had once cared for. Fujio's eyes turned cold. Who were they? She demanded. Qin Xiaodong answered without leaving a single name out. 3 players ranked high on the ladder: Mie Su, Liang Xuguang, and Zhang Yingchao. After learning who the culprits were, Fu Jiu grabbed her skateboard and rushed straight to the internet cafe. The owner recognized her instantly. She was the one who always booked the same corner seat for half an hour. But tonight was different. She had serious business to handle and rented a machine until midnight. Handing over the login card, the owner reminded her that a strong pro team would be streaming later. Fu Jiu accepted it with a faint smile. This was exactly what she'd been waiting for. Once logged in, she opened the ladder rankings and saw the names of the 3 traders. Her fingers danced across the keys, quickly changing her IGN to start pulling in clients. Just as she was planning how to crush them, a message popped up from Qin Mo, asking where she was. Fu Jiu foolishly replied, "Internet cafe," only to remember she had promised to run dungeons with him tonight. She scrambled for an excuse to cancel. Qin Mo wasn't fooled. "Someone's messing with you again, aren't they?" he typed. Fu Jiu jolted, half expecting him to be standing right behind her. No matter how she tried to brush it off, Qin Mo cut through her words. "Want me to come over and shut them down for you?" Staring at his reply, Qin Mo froze for a beat. Then the corner of her lips curved upward. The livestream soon went live. Liang Xuguang took the lead in the interview, smugly belittling He Honghua's company, claiming it had always been worthless and that she had only dragged them down. In front of the entire player base, he went further, mocking He Honghua's rural background and calling her loud and graceless. Listening to such hypocritical insults, Fu Jiu let out a cold laugh. Her revenge couldn't start soon enough. Once the interviews wrapped up, the event shifted into the gaming segment. Suddenly, the chat exploded. "If you're really such gods, dare you fight one-on-one?" The barrage of messages was impossible to ignore, and the host reluctantly tossed the challenge over to Liang Xuguang. At that moment, Fu Jiu appeared on the arena stage. The broadcast descended into chaos, riddled with gaps, yet the organizers made no move to drive her off. On the contrary, the unexpected twist sent viewership soaring. This mess was raking in massive traffic for them. Players watching at their computers erupted when they recognized Fu Jiu's ID. Liang Xuguang gave her only a glance. Seeing her clad in low-level gear, he didn't even bother to take her seriously, posturing like some master while pointing out her flaws. Mie Su and Zhang Yingchao grinned with smug amusement, convinced Fu Jiu was nothing more than a reckless rookie. But Fu Jiu paid their words no mind. She knew the real show would begin when she made them eat their arrogance. Fu Jiu locked onto Liang Xuguang without hesitation, the highest ranked of the 3, and the one who had insulted He Honghua the most. Bound by the livestream schedule, Liang Xuguang had no choice but to accept, secretly planning to crush Fu Jiu in the very first second. But as soon as the countdown ended, Fu Jiu's spear lashed out. Her blazing speed left Liang Xuguang no time to react. He was KO'd instantly. The arena went dead silent before erupting in disbelief. A top-ranked ladder pro, taken down by an amateur in a single move. The atmosphere exploded. In the internet cafe, the crowd roared and the owner rushed around non-stop, overwhelmed by the chaos sparked by Black Spade Z. Passing Fu Jiu's station, the owner caught a glimpse of her screen and froze. That ID really was Black Spade Z. Fu Jiu merely turned her head and said calmly, "Keep it quiet. I prefer staying low-key." Then she looked coldly at the fallen Liang Xuguang and declared, "Even without top-tier gear, my skill alone is enough to crush you." The line set the chat ablaze. Viewers went wild while Liang Xuguang's face darkened instantly. The host rushed to cover for him, but against the tidal wave of public opinion, it was already too late. Suddenly, the organizers held up a sign, urging the host to get an interview with Black Spade Z immediately. Liang Xuguang, humiliated under Fu Jiu's cold gaze, snapped back with an excuse, claiming Fu Jiu must have been using a speed hack to win. The online chatter split instantly. To most viewers, it seemed impossible for an amateur to obliterate a pro in one strike. The host wavered, suggesting the duel be reported to the GMs for review. Just then, a commanding voice rang out. "Strength in this game has never been about gear. If you doubt him, then fight me. I won't use equipment either." A familiar figure appeared on the stage, Qin Mo himself. His main account had only ever surfaced at the annual All-Star Carnival. For him to step into the arena now, It could only mean one thing. He was here for Black Spade Z. My little brother doesn't need anyone speaking for him. Qin Mo's domineering declaration sent shockwaves through the crowd, nearly blowing the stream out of control. The host wasted no time milking the hype, announcing a Qin Mo versus the newcomer showdown, instantly whipping the audience into a frenzy. Meanwhile, back at Qin Corporation, Feng Yi was practically slamming holes into the desk. Qin Mo showing up in a live stream on his own? That was enough to make him see red. With Qin Mo's endorsement fees sky high, casually appearing on a random platform could mean a serious financial hit for the company. On stage, Qin Mo didn't waste words. He locked eyes on Liang Xuguang and flatly demanded a duel. Liang Xuguang froze, utterly dumbfounded. First he'd been humiliated by a rookie, and now he was being singled out by Qin God himself. He felt cornered. With Qin Mo's superstar status, there wasn't even time to hesitate. To make matters worse, his team boss barked at him. If he refused this fight, he could kiss his career goodbye. Win or lose, the company would ride the wave of publicity. With no way out, Liang Xuguang swallowed hard and stepped up to the stage, resigned to his fate. As soon as the duel began, Qin Mo stripped off all his legendary gear, leaving himself in the most ordinary set of equipment. The moment the countdown hit 0, he ended it in a blink, instantly one-shotting Liang Xuguang. With his sword sheathed again, Qin Mo returned to the earlier point. Liang Xuguang had accused Fu Jiu of hacking, yet now Qin Mo himself had crushed him barehanded. The humiliation tanked Liang's popularity, and the hate from players poured in like a flood. Liang snapped, ripping off his headset and slamming it onto the ground. Burning with shame, he turned to storm off. But Fu Jiu wasn't about to let him slip away that easily. She tore open his past for all to hear. When no one else would take him in, when he was so broke he survived on instant noodles in internet cafes, it was he Manhwa who trained him. And now he dared to sneer at his boss for being from the countryside. Not only ungrateful but willing to betray his benefactor for profit, and still shameless enough to throw mud back. The words hit harder than any skill. Liang's career was as good as over. If he could even survive the online backlash, it would be a miracle. Fu Jiu then dropped the bombshell. Boss, he is not short-sighted nor incapable of nurturing talent. I am proof. I am a player under He Corporation. She spat her final threat. Tonight was just a warm-up. When the rookie tournament comes, I'll smash every one of your boss's trainees. The words sent shockwaves. Liang Xuguang and his two teammates looked as if they'd swallowed poison. When had He Corporation ever produced a monster like Black Spade Z? That single battle tonight sent the entire internet into a frenzy. Calls flooded He Honghua's phone non-stop. Deals that had been deadlocked were now being offered on a silver platter. Hearing the respectful voices on the other end, He Honghua could hardly believe it. The same investors who once threatened to pull out were now lining up to pour in more money, all because of one statement from Black Spade Z. Suddenly, a text message arrived. Qin Xiaodong pulled it up on the computer, and the screen displayed Black Spade Z's declaration from the arena. To the public, this figure was a hero, standing up against injustice. Yet as the supposed boss, He Honghua couldn't help but feel conflicted. She didn't even know who Black Spade Z really was. If the investors pushed forward and later discovered that Black Spade Z couldn't be reached, that would spell disaster. Just then Fu Jiu walked in, clothes soaked through. Hearing what had happened, He Honghua mentioned the investors' doubts but dared not commit without certainty. Fu Jiu, however, remained calm. She told He Honghua to go ahead with the negotiations. After all, Black Spade Z was now a rising star. No way would she sabotage her own reputation. Just then, Qin Mo sent a message checking in on Fu Jiu, telling her not to run around on a rainy night. Fu Jiu paused for a few seconds, then smirked and snapped a picture of herself, clothes completely soaked, and sent it over. Qin Mo lowered his head, staring at the photo, and the tips of his ears quietly turned red. After spending the whole night building her new computer, Fu Jiu sat on the bus the next morning, looking exhausted but inwardly fulfilled. Suddenly, in the reflection of the window, she noticed her hair slowly fading into silver. When she arrived at school and pushed open the classroom door, she saw Shui Yaoyao being kicked to the ground by a boy. His face twisted with disgust as he hurled insults at her. A few girls on the side chimed in, mocking Yaoyao's appearance. Just as the boy raised his leg to strike again, Fu Jiu stepped in, sending him staggering backward with a single kick. She bent down, helped Yao Yao up and gathered the scattered papers. Her voice was icy as she said, "A man who hits a woman isn't even worth being called trash." "If you're not convinced," she added coldly, "meet me on the field after class and let's see whose fists are harder." The fight had started simply because the boy didn't want to share a desk with Yao Yao. Fu Jiu settled it on the spot by taking his seat herself. Seeing Yao Yao's tear-filled eyes, Fu Jiu casually praised her. "Those buns you brought last time were pretty good." When Yao Yao stayed silent, Fu Jiu pulled out a lollipop and handed it to her. After switching seats, Fu Jiu ended up sleeping straight through until the end of class. When school was over, Qin Mo's car was already waiting at the gate. He wanted to take Fu Jiu out for dinner, but she turned him down. Social dinners weren't her thing, she was still a high schooler after all. She even mentioned that her new desk mate would be tutoring her from now on. The moment Qin Mo saw the words "new desk mate tutoring," his jealousy flared instantly and he pressed on with the topic. That was when he found out Fu Jiu's rank in the class was dead last. During his evening business dinner, Qin Mo still held his phone, messaging Fu Jiu casually. His secretary Liang stole glances at the chat logs. He remembered it well. This was the very same Fu Jiu who, even at a drinking table, could make Qin Mo laugh. And when Qin Mo learned Fu Jiu also had a younger brother in high school, they naturally found common ground. As they spoke about those shared details, Qin Mo couldn't help but smile genuinely. During the afternoon class, Shui Yao Yao noticed that Fu Jiu's hair seemed to be fading in color, and she couldn't help glancing a few more times. She realized Fu Jiu was typing rapidly on her keyboard, and when she peeked at the screen she saw Fu Jiu was live tracking and analyzing the hero ranking board. Suddenly, Shui thought of the scandal about Director Zhang being exposed, suspecting there might be a connection. After all, the person who leaked that dirt was most likely one of the students Zhang had punished, and Fu Jiu fit that possibility perfectly. Sensing Shui's unusual gaze, Fu Jiu turned her head to look back at her. Shui quickly slipped her a note, trying to confirm if Fu Jiu was the justice messenger from before. Fu Jiu accepted the note and admitted it directly. Seeing her actions, Shui felt like Fu Jiu was searching for someone, so she mentioned that she herself had been playing the game Heroes for quite a while. Without hesitation, Fu Jiu opened up an arena match for her. Watching Shui's gameplay, Fu Jiu's eyes lit up. Her skills were impressive. Fu Jiu immediately asked Shui to join her, and to her surprise, Shui nodded without a moment's hesitation. Just like that, Fu Jiu's two-person squad gained a third member. Covering her mouth, Shui giggled, saying when it comes to studying, Fu Jiu will still need to put in more effort. Fu Jiu gave an awkward smile in return. Though her grades ranked at the very bottom of the class, the truth was that physics was the only subject she really couldn't get through. When physics class began, Shui Yao Yao slipped Fu Jiu a note. For the rookie tournament, every high school participant has to pass each subject individually. Reading it, Fu Jiu nervously scribbled back. "Wait, the rules changed? I thought as long as the total score passed the line it was fine." Shui shook her head. Despair hit Fu Jiu. She could handle every other subject with ease, but physics alone was enough to take half her life. Shui passed another note asking if Fu Jiu wanted to hire a tutor. Fu Jiu immediately asked for Shui's phone number instead. But Shui looked embarrassed, she didn't own a phone. Right then, the teacher appeared out of nowhere behind them and swiftly snatched the note away. The students around them began whispering, joking that Fu Jiu was writing a love letter to Shui, even admiring Fu Jiu's taste. Hearing those words, Shui was about to stand up and explain, but Fu Jiu tugged lightly at the corner of her sleeve. For her, rumors like these were nothing new, just everyday noise. It was the day Qin Mo had arranged to play tennis with Fu Jiu. Since she just made a new friend, Fu Jiu planned to bring Shui Yao Yao along as well. After school, the weather suddenly turned and rain began to fall. Fu Jiu had barely stepped out of the classroom when a few blushing girls ran up, inviting her to see the newly released movie. Fu Jiu politely declined, gently lifting a strand of one girl's hair as she said softly, "It's raining today, you'd better head home early." The girls around her instantly melted, completely captivated. Sitting in the car, Qin Mo witnessed everything and his jealousy boiled over. He shoved open the car door and strode over without even bothering with an umbrella. Before Fu Jiu could react, a strong hand yanked her back by the collar. Qin Mo warned her again not to flirt around so casually. Fu Jiu tried to protest, But Chinemo seized the very hand she'd just used to charm the girls, leaving her with no excuse. The girls nearby went wild, their imaginations running rampant about the relationship between Chinemo and Fujio. Chinemo snatched the umbrella from his secretary's hand and held it over Fujio. Turning her head, Fujio called out for Shui Yaoyao to get in the car as well. But the moment Shui Yaoyao saw Chinemo in person, she was so shocked she couldn't even speak. She had never imagined the one who invited Fujio to play tennis would be that legendary figure. The girls nearby started gossiping again, speculating that Shui Yaoyao must secretly be some rich young lady. Otherwise, how could a chubby girl like her possibly ride in Chinmo's car? Fujio originally planned to have Shui Yaoyao sit in the back, but Chinemo stopped her. His rule was simple. The girl sits in the front while he and Fujio share the back seat. Fujio pulled a long face, clearly looking like she had no way to argue. Once everyone was inside, Chinemo reluctantly pulled out a dry towel and began wiping Fujio's soaked hair. Driving in front, Secretary Liang almost couldn't believe his eyes. His boss, known for being a neat freak, was actually letting a dripping wet boy ride in his car. The atmosphere in the back seat grew strangely tense. Fujio suddenly grabbed Chinmo's flushed hand and looked at him with a teasing smile. Their eyes met for only a few seconds before Chinemo lost his composure. His face turned red and he tossed the towel at Fujio before turning sideways, trying to keep his distance. Fujio stared at him in confusion while casually drying her hair. Chinemo slipped on his headphones, though the sides of his face were still burning red. When he noticed Fujio unwrapping a lollipop, he couldn't help but glance back again. Worried that Fujio might catch a cold, Chinemo ordered Secretary Liang to stop at a nearby cafe and buy 2 cups of hot coffee for Fujio and Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao turned her head slightly, surprised by the intimate way Chinemo and Fujio interacted. Deep down, she felt she was lucky. If not for Fujio, she'd never have gotten a chance to sit in this car. At that moment, Secretary Liang walked up to the car window, explaining that the coffee Chinemo ordered was sold out. He asked if Chinemo wanted a different one, but Chinemo firmly refused. His next words nearly made Shui Yaoyao spit out her drink. "I'll drink his." And of course, everyone knew his meant Fujio. Secretary Liang almost broke down on the spot. The proud, germ-phobic young master he had served for years had just said he would share someone else's coffee. Fujio handed over the cup she had just cooled down. To everyone's shock, Chinemo leaned forward and took a sip directly. Both Secretary Liang and Shui Yaoyao froze, staring wide-eyed as if they were witnessing something beyond comprehension. Chinemo sat back up and muttered casually, "Too sweet." Fujio stuck out her tongue playfully, thinking to herself that maybe it was because she had just eaten a lollipop. When they arrived at the tennis court, Fujio suddenly realized a huge problem. Once it was time to change into the tennis uniform, she would have to share the men's locker room with Chinemo. That meant her biggest secret could be in danger of being exposed. As soon as they reached the entrance, a staff member respectfully guided Chinemo into a VIP room. While Shui Yaoyao was led away by a female attendant, Chinemo casually tossed a set of clothes to Fujio before walking straight into the men's locker room. Fujio had assumed a VIP room would at least ensure privacy, but once inside she saw only a row of lockers and no partitions at all. Everything was wide open. Chinemo noticed Fujio frozen at the back, and it reminded him of their awkward first encounter. But this time was different. With Chinemo already changed, Fujio's mind spun quickly, and she decided to play another trick. She placed one hand on Chinmo's shoulder, eyes flashing mischievously. "Oh, if you're so eager to watch me undress, could it be that you're actually interested in me?" Chinmo's expression darkened. He slammed Fujio against the lockers in a sharp wall slam, eyes full of restraint and confusion. Where on earth had she learned to say things like this? Fujio sighed softly. "Spend enough nights in clubs and you pick things up. My reputation, you know it better than anyone." Chinemo let out a cold laugh, still fuming. Without another word, he turned and walked out, no longer in the mood to watch Fujio change. Once Chinemo left, Fujio leaned heavily against the locker, letting out a long breath. "So fierce. What, is he actually a virgin?" She muttered inwardly, then hurriedly stripped off her school uniform, revealing the plain white undershirt beneath as she rushed to change. Just then, click. The door opened and Chinemo walked back in. The distance between them was barely a fist's length, and Fujio was already half undressed, her uniform hanging loose in her hands. Chinemo stared at her with a questioning look while Fujio froze in place. All she could do was pretend to stay calm, or else risk raising his suspicion. After staring for a long moment, Chinemo suddenly smiled knowingly, as if something had clicked in his mind, and let out a soft sigh. Cold sweat rolled down Fujio's back. She thought her biggest secret had been discovered. But instead, Chinemo only teased, saying she was so skinny she looked like a bamboo stick. Relieved, Fujio quickly played along with his words, and managed to finish changing into the tennis outfit without being exposed. The two of them chatted as they walked onto the court, where Shui Yaoyao was already in her sportswear, waiting patiently. Soon Chinemo and Fujio began their match. From the sidelines, Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but feel that Fujio kept flirting with Chinemo the entire time. If their genders were switched, they'd actually look like the perfect couple. Midway through the game, Fujio turned and shouted to Yaoyao, telling her to hop online and play a few matches, and that she could help herself to the fruit on the side. Chinmo's expression darkened instantly. The moment Fujio turned back to the court, a tennis ball came flying at her feet like a cannon shot. The ball hit the hard court with such spin and force that it left a deep mark. It looked less like tennis and more like an assassination attempt. Fujio protested loudly, "Didn't you say you'd go easy on me? How come you're already going back on your word? If you're here to play, then focus on the game. Stop trying to flirt all the time," Chinemo snapped impatiently. The two soon got into the rhythm, their fierce rally drawing the attention of everyone around. To the onlookers, this level of play looked nothing short of professional. Coincidentally, Fu Ximing was also at the same tennis club. Hearing the buzz of the crowd, he looked over, but with his poor eyesight he couldn't clearly see who was facing off against Chinemo. Still, he knew one thing for sure. Anyone who could play tennis with Chinemo personally had to be one of the elite heirs from the military compound. A few of his lackeys wanted to use Fu Ximing's connections to meet Chinemo, but Fu Ximing tactfully turned them down. He knew perfectly well he didn't have that kind of influence. Coming here was just his excuse to maybe grab a word with Chinemo. Meanwhile, during the break, Fujio was already panting heavily, while Chinemo remained completely at ease. After taking a sip of water, Chinemo glanced at Fujio. For some reason, he suddenly had the urge to hand the bottle over. Fujio didn't hesitate. Seeing the water passed her way, she grabbed it without a second thought. As she tilted her head back and gulped it down, the girls watching nearby squealed with excitement. After finishing her drink, Fujio walked over to Ruan Yaoyao and watched her play. Her hand speed was decent, but there were far too many unnecessary moves. Fujio slid into the seat behind her, one hand pressing lightly over Ruan Yaoyao's hand, the other resting on her shoulder, teaching her as directly as possible. Feeling the fluid precision in Fujio's guidance, Ruan Yaoyao couldn't help but wonder. Which player on the ladder was Fujio? This was the kind of execution only pros had. When she looked up, she caught Chinmo's sharp gaze sweeping over in their direction. At first, she thought he was staring at her, but when the glance shifted to Fujio, she quickly realized she had guessed wrong. Meanwhile, Fujio went on chatting with Ruan Yaoyao as if nothing had happened. Chinmo finally lost his patience. Striding over, he slammed the laptop shut with a single motion. He hadn't brought Fujio here to watch her flirt with someone else. This was supposed to be tennis. Fujio finally realized that gaming in a tennis hall wasn't exactly appropriate. She was just about to drag Ruan Yaoyao along to play with Chinmo. Chinmo's expression instantly darkened, and Ruan Yaoyao quickly understood. If she actually agreed, Chinmo might just end her on the spot. Left with no choice, she teamed up with Fujio. Hearing Ruan Yaoyao keep calling her Lord Jio, Fujio asked where that nickname came from. Ruan Yaoyao whispered that it was something her fangirls at school came up with. They all thought Fujio was like a crown prince, wicked yet domineering. The explanation instantly lifted Fujio's mood. She grinned and decided to personally guide Ruan Yaoyao in tennis. But the way she stood behind Ruan Yaoyao looked a little too intimate. Girls outside the court had their eyes locked on Fujio, their hearts practically stolen by that smile. For many, it was the first time seeing such a handsome boy in the hall. Sitting off to the side, Chinmo crossed his arms, his face darkening further. He had no intention of just watching quietly. In the next moment, he grabbed a racket, strode forward with a cold face, and launched a blistering serve, forcing Fujio straight into a duel. At that moment, Fu Ximing stood dumbfounded outside the VIP lounge, grumbling in his heart. Qin Mo's airs were just too much. He had already been left waiting for 15 minutes straight, and the bodyguards at the door didn't even glance at him, let alone let him in. Forced by his own agenda, Fu Ximing plastered on a fake smile and tried to chat up the guards, insisting he just wanted a chance to meet Qin Mo. When the guard stepped inside to ask for instructions, Qin Mo happened to see Fu Jiu enjoying herself. With a cold smirk, he decided to make Fu Ximing wait even longer. Fu Jiu noticed the same guard walking in and out 3 times, starting to wonder if Qin Mo had something going on. That Fu Ximing from last time, he bullied you, didn't he? Qin Mo suddenly asked. Fu Jiu nodded but couldn't figure out why Qin Mo brought him up out of nowhere. Outside, Fu Ximing was so furious he felt like stomping holes into the floor, yet the door still wouldn't open. Standing there looking pitiful, he was even mistaken for a waiter by passers-by. Enraged, he cursed aloud, which ended up drawing his 2 lackeys and Fu Zhongyi over. Across the hall, a green-haired guy noticed Fu Ximing's tantrum and quickly connected the dots. This venue had been booked out by Qin Mo, and Fu Ximing had been waiting all this time just to cozy up to him. The rumor spread fast, and soon everyone around was casting Fu Ximing disdainful looks. The guard came back in once more to report the situation, but Qin Mo's face remained cold. He simply chose to ignore it altogether. After a few more rounds, they finally took a break. While chatting, Qin Mo suddenly brought up Fu Jiu's connection with Shui Yaoyao. When he learned that Shui Yaoyao was supposed to tutor Fu Jiu in physics, Qin Mo immediately claimed the job for himself. Both Fu Jiu and Shui Yaoyao froze in disbelief. A CEO with a jam-packed schedule was actually willing to clear time just to tutor Fu Jiu? What made Fu Jiu even more nervous was the thought that Qin Mo had 1,000 ways to keep her out of the rookie tournament. With him declaring it so firmly, this arrangement was as good as set in stone. Back in the locker room, Qin Mo was halfway through changing when his phone rang, and he casually answered the call. Out of the corner of her eye, Fu Jiu sneaked a glance and nearly choked. So this was what people meant by slim with clothes ripped without. A chill ran down her spine. She told herself it was better not to tease Qin Mo anymore. There was a dangerous vibe about him that lingered in her mind like a warning. After dropping Shui Yaoyao home that evening, Qin Mo glanced at Fu Jiu and told Secretary Liang to cancel the dinner engagement. Not only that, he announced he was taking Fu Jiu back to his own house. Secretary Liang's eyes widened in shock. Apart from Qin Mo's childhood friends from the military compound, almost no one had ever been invited there. When they arrived, Fu Jiu looked up at the mansion. Calling it a palace wouldn't be an exaggeration. Nearly every window was lit, shining with the aura of wealth. She even fantasized that once they stepped inside, a whole row of maids might line up to welcome them. Instead, only a middle-aged woman stood by the door. Her surname was Zhang, and Qin Mo always addressed her as Aunt Zhang. Seeing Fu Jiu, Qin Mo pulled her closer and formally introduced her as his younger brother, saying he would often bring her home in the future. Aunt Zhang found herself pleased, thinking this boy looked clean-cut and carried himself well. What Fu Jiu didn't expect was that even a casual smile at Aunt Zhang was enough for Qin Mo to accuse her of flirting, leaving Fu Jiu protesting that he was being way too strict. Qin Mo took off his jacket and sat down, clearly intending to have a man-to-man talk with Fu Jiu. Out of nowhere, he asked seriously, "Are you eager to fall in love right now?" Fu Jiu froze on the spot. Before she could deny it, Qin Mo had already launched into a lecture, saying studies should come first and dating too early would ruin her future. To make things worse, he even used her bottom-of-the-class grades as proof of puppy love. Listening to the lecture, Fu Jiu quickly lost interest. She got up, walked over with a grin and teased, "Let's change the subject. How about what makes a qualified older brother?" Qin Mo sneered. "So you're saying I'm not good enough as a brother?" The sudden surge of pressure in his tone made Fu Jiu instinctively take a step back. She awkwardly patted Qin Mo's shoulder. Luckily, he didn't throw her out for being cheeky. Still smiling, she said, "I only dare to joke like this because we're close, see?" But in the very next second, Qin Mo's expression darkened. He shoved her hand away and finally blurted out what had been stuck in his chest all day. "You're close with a lot of people, like that Miss Shui." Fu Jiu froze, completely caught off guard. Realizing he had spoken too bluntly, Qin Mo coughed a few times in embarrassment, trying to ease the awkward air. After a long day, Chinemo asked Aunt Zhang to prepare some food while he headed off to shower and change. Fujio had no intention of repeating the awkward same room changing incident, so she used the excuse of ill-fitting clothes to stay behind in the living room. With him gone, she finally felt relaxed and began wandering around the house. She stopped at a bookshelf, flipped through a few spines and realized there wasn't a single novel, only heavy academic tomes. Just then a cat strolled leisurely past her. Her eyes lit up and she reached out to pet it, only to be coldly ignored. Narrowing her eyes, Fujio smirked. "If you don't come here, I'll shave all your fur off." As if it understood, the cat's fur bristled instantly and it swiped its paw at her. Startled, Fujio fell back onto the floor, right as Chinemo appeared in the doorway, chuckling at the scene. "That's Princess," he explained, still amused. "Funny, she usually never acts like this around men." He called softly and the cat immediately padded over, affectionately rubbing against his hand. Fujio obviously couldn't admit she wasn't a boy, so she forced a grin and said, "Guess she's just jealous I'm better looking." Judging by the cat's fiery temper, Fujio had assumed it was female, until Chinemo casually revealed the truth. This princess was actually a male cat. No matter how hard Fujio tried to play with him, Princess just kept staring back with a look of pure disdain, leaving her utterly defeated. Chinemo noticed Fujio glancing at the bookshelf and casually asked about it. Fujio scratched her head awkwardly and quickly changed the subject. Chinemo reached out and patted her head. "You can read those later," he said flatly. Fujio pulled a face. "Stop patting my head or I'll never grow taller." His blunt, no-nonsense tone made her mutter, "With that attitude you'll never get a girlfriend." Chinemo smirked. "I don't have to chase anyone. Girls chase me." The confidence in his voice left Fujio speechless. Her eyes drifted to the table full of delicious dishes, only to realize there was just one set of utensils, for Chinemo. Her stomach growled in protest. She thought bitterly, after playing tennis with him all day, I still have to starve? But Chinemo cut in seriously. "You only spent a third of the time actually playing. The rest you wasted flirting and tutoring." Fujio narrowed her eyes and teased, "Jealous?" The single word made Chinemo slam his chopsticks down, but he was already building immunity to her tricks. Just as Fujio was about to explain, a piece of meat was shoved straight into her mouth. Aunt Zhang, standing behind them, froze. Memories surfaced of Chinemo at 8 years old. Back then, even his own mother couldn't get away with feeding him a single bite. Just as Fujio was ready to head home after dinner, Chinemo suddenly said, "I've already prepared a physics book. Tutoring starts tonight." Before she could escape, Chinemo grabbed her by the collar and dragged her upstairs. He flipped open a thick physics book and said coolly, "Ask if you don't understand." To Fujio, though the entire book was a mystery, she was a hopeless physics flunky. Seeing this, Chinemo dropped the sarcasm and switched into serious mode, patiently breaking down each concept for her. Fujio rested her chin on one hand, staring blankly at him, thinking who knew this guy could actually explain things so clearly. But the longer she watched, the more she drifted off, unsure whether she was focused on the lesson or on him. Eventually, she picked up her pen to work through the problems herself. Chinemo, still talking on a business call, casually pointed out her mistakes at the same time. Being under his constant gaze only made Fujio more nervous, terrified of writing another wrong answer. After a while, Fujio's trembling hand finally finished a problem. Chinemo glanced at her paper and instantly understood why she was ranked dead last in physics. The answer was so bad it defied explanation. To Fujio, physics wasn't just difficult. It was basically a crime against humanity. Watching her blank eyes, void of any motivation, Chinemo could already picture the inevitable failing grade waiting for her in 7 days. He pushed the physics book back toward her and told her to mark every chapter she had recently studied so he could help her improve more efficiently. Fujio narrowed her eyes at him and smirked. "I'd better call my teacher first and ask." Chinemo felt a wave of pressure hit him square in the chest. To make sure nothing slipped through, Chinemo personally called Director Wang of Jiangqing No. 1 High School. The moment Director Wang heard his voice, he nearly jumped out of his seat. Chinemo had graduated years ago. Why on earth was he calling now? After some small talk, Chinemo casually brought up another question. Were classroom seats still arranged without regard to gender? When he got the confirmation, Chinemo paused, then stated coldly, Boys and girls sharing a desk too easily sparks the wrong kind of feelings. It's practically early romance. Director Wong hurried to agree, nodding along like his life depended on it. But then it struck him, why would Chinemo care so much? Could it be that someone he knew was sitting in one of those problem classes? Chinemo was about to press further when the door opened and Fujio walked in. With her present, he dropped the topic and went back to physics. After the call, Director Wong felt a chill run down his spine. Was Chinemo really this concerned about a remedial class? Could one of the students be his relative? But no one from the school board had ever mentioned such a thing. Or was it a new girlfriend? The thought made Director Wong uneasy, but it wasn't something he dared to confirm. All he could do was follow Chinmo's orders to the letter. Right after, he phoned Fujio's physics teacher and instructed that from now on, seating arrangements must keep boys and girls strictly separate. Chinmo's fingers flew across the keyboard, quickly filtering out several must-test questions. Even if Fujio didn't understand a single thing about physics, all she had to do was memorize the answers. She picked a few problems, calculated the minimum passing score, and was ready to call it a night. For her, passing was already a blessing. But Chinemo wouldn't allow it. For a student he taught personally, just passing was the bare minimum. Still, it was getting late and Fujio insisted on ending the session. With no choice, Chinemo pulled out his phone and instructed Aunt Zhang to bring up a set of pajamas. Fujio froze, unsure if this was supposed to be a surprise or a nightmare. She quickly waved her hands, insisting she wanted to go home. Chinemo, however, calmly replied that it was too late, too unsafe to go back alone. She should just stay the night. Fujio argued that she could take a taxi, but this entire neighborhood belonged to Chinemo. There was no escape. After exhausting all excuses, Fujio finally decided to call her family driver to pick her up. Chinemo listened to Fujio's endless excuses, his face growing darker by the second. Plenty of people begged to stay with him, yet Fujio was the first who racked her brain just to leave. Fujio tried to use, "I have class tomorrow" as an excuse, but Chinemo had an immediate counter. He had to head to the company in the morning anyway, so he could drop her off at school on the way. Every argument was shut down one by one, leaving Fujio speechless. She might manage to keep her covered during the day. But once night came, it was a whole different danger. The thought of sharing a night under the same roof made her uneasy. Anything could expose her secret. With a sharp slap on the table, Chinemo gave her two choices. Either take the pajamas from Aunt Zhang and stay the night, or solve another physics problem. Before Fujio could protest, a knock came at the door. Aunt Zhang entered cheerfully, holding pajamas. It was the set Chinemo used to wear back in middle school. Hearing that Fujio would be staying, Aunt Zhang's eyes lit up with a warmth that made it nearly impossible to refuse. Chinemo seized on that moment, cutting off any chance of retreat. Fujio had no choice but to stay. She turned her gaze to the bed behind her, silently bracing herself. She would need a plan to get through tonight unscathed. Fujio walked into the guest room, thinking that as long as they weren't sharing the same bed, there was nothing to worry about. She pulled out her laptop and logged into the game. The moment she entered the interface, a friend request popped up from Feng Shang. Reading his message, Fujio couldn't help but chuckle. Feng Shang had assumed her silence all day meant Chinemo had kidnapped her. Having bottled up her frustration the whole day, Fujio finally had a chance to vent, and she wasn't about to waste it. She started trash-talking with him online. She typed deliberately, "Staying at Chinmo's place is just standard practice. Even if I end up sharing his bed next time, it's nothing to fuss over." But before she could enjoy the joke, a tall shadow loomed right behind her. Hearing that familiar voice, Fujio froze in shock. If the person involved heard that line, nothing good could come of it. Chinemo stared at her with amused eyes. "So that's what you want? To share my bed? Seems like giving you a guest room was a complete waste." Seeing how serious he looked, Fujio scrambled to explain herself, but every excuse crumbled under the weight of what he had already heard. Chinemo snatched Fujio's laptop and deleted Feng Shang from her friend list. He had no idea who Feng Shang really was and simply assumed it was some random guy Fujio had been chatting with. On the other side, Feng Shang was utterly baffled. Why had he been blocked out of nowhere? To prevent Fujio from wandering off and chatting with others before the rookie tournament, Chinemo decided she would use his account from now on. Fujio took the towel and headed into the bathroom. Standing before the mirror, she noticed her hair had grown even paler, gradually shifting toward a silver-white shade. What startled her more was the sudden appearance of a small mole near her eye, an unmistakable mark from her previous life, now slowly resurfacing. A knock came from outside. Chin Mo's voice carried through the door, warning her that the only rule of using his account was simple: no adding friends. Fu Jiu quickly opened the door, flashing him a mischievous grin. Maybe it was the steam curling out of the bathroom, or maybe something else stirring inside him, but Chin Mo froze for a moment, staring at her in a daze. Snapping out of it, he abruptly slammed the door shut. Fu Jiu was baffled. Why does this guy's mood always run off the script? She muttered while stripping off her clothes. She carefully set aside her chest wrap, knowing she'd need it later and making sure it stayed dry. Just as she stood bare, a knock came at the door. Chin Mo had brought her a bottle of shower gel, since the guest room's bathroom had nothing stocked. Fu Jiu cautiously cracked the door open, poking her head out just a little. Through the steam, Chin Mo caught a hazy glimpse of her silhouette, and for a moment he nearly lost control again. Spotting his flushed ears, Fu Jiu couldn't resist teasing him while taking the bottle. Chin Mo bristled instantly, snapping back at her. On the surface, Fu Jiu kept her relaxed smile, but inwardly she was straining to keep her back straight, pulling her body further inside. She knew if that door opened even a little wider, her secret would be exposed. Fu Jiu sank into the bathtub, letting the warm water wash away the day's exhaustion as she leaned back with a soft sigh of relief. Yet one worry still lingered in her mind. The chest wrap was holding for now, but whether that sleepwear could really hide her chest was another matter entirely. At that moment, Chin Mo sat in the guest room, laptop open, joining a remote company meeting. The topic was the batch of rookies that had already been pre-selected. After a long moment of thought, Chin Mo decided to scrap the plan and have them compete again. The original proposal came from the higher-ups of Chin Corp, but this was no longer the old Chin Corporation. Now that Chin Mo was in charge, the rules were his to make. Besides Liang, the secretary, and Feng Yi, there was also a man named Robert at the meeting. He was surprised by Chin Mo's decision and had been paying close attention to Chin Mo's recent moves, including the shocking news that Chin Mo had personally run a dungeon just days ago. Robert was curious. Who in the world could be important enough for Chin Mo to put in this much effort? Chin Mo answered with a straight face, "Not me. My younger brother." Robert froze. He had never heard of Chin Mo having a younger brother. Only Liang knew who that so-called brother really was. Chin Mo calmly added, "A sworn brother." With that, he closed his laptop and rose to his feet, deciding it was time to check on Fu Jiu. After all, how long could one bath possibly take? The moment the word shower came up, Secretary Liang nearly crushed his laptop. Scenes of Chin Mo and Fu Jiu's overly intimate interactions kept flashing in his mind. Yet as a professional secretary, he dared not speculate about his boss's private life. What could he possibly report to the old master and madam? "Your son might have been bent by another guy?" That thought alone left him completely stuck. Meanwhile, hearing Chin Mo talk about his brother, Feng Yi decided to check on his own younger sibling. When he pushed open the door, he found Feng Shang slumped in his chair, the computer screen filled with countless unanswered friend requests he had sent to Fu Jiu. Thinking his brother had simply run out of in-game money, Feng Yi immediately pulled out his phone, ready to transfer him cash. Feng Shang shook his head. He wanted to explain but then remembered. His secret participation in the internal test must not be exposed to his brother, so he swallowed the words back down. After Feng Shang kept his silence, Feng Yi started grumbling about Chin Mo's recent behavior, canceling the pre-approved rookie slots at the drop of a hat, then forcing all of them into the rookie tournament schedule, overturning the entire plan in one stroke. Feng Yi couldn't figure it out, but Feng Shang knew very well. Chin Mo was doing all of this just to vent his anger for Fu Jiu. Meanwhile, Fu Jiu strolled out of the bathroom only to bump straight into Chin Mo. Chin Mo motioned for Fu Jiu to sit down, then personally took a towel and began drying Fu Jiu's damp hair. At that moment, Aunt Zhang happened to walk in with a late-night snack. Watching the scene, she couldn't help thinking, Chin Mo had truly changed. Munching on the snack, Fu Jiu casually logged into Chin Mo's gaming account. Seeing the account stacked with gold worth over $1 million, she couldn't hide the envy flickering in her eyes.